You can do Nayania Baria, Nayania Manania, Manania. You can do Nayania Baria, Nayania Manania, Manania.
From the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, this is the A Cuppa and A Yarn podcast.
Welcome back to our podcast, A Cuppa and A Yarn, brought to you by the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. I'm Michelle Aleksandrovics-Lovegrove. It was 1986. A 22-year-old man busily filled in a membership form at the Murrin Bridge local Aboriginal Land Council. Craig Cromelin had been a part of the community since childhood and was keen to join the new Land Council and make his mark locally within New South Wales' new Aboriginal Land Rights network. Little did he know, but signing the form that day sparked a passion that would ultimately see him represent his region nationally and internationally, as well as in New South Wales itself, as a councillor with the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. Craig Cromelin has been a councillor since 2007 and has decided to leave that role and move forward in a new phase of life. I hope you enjoy this episode of A Cuppa and A Yarn with Craig Cromelin. Hello, Councillor Craig Cromelin. Welcome to A Cuppa and A Yarn.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for inviting me to come along.
So with this series that we're doing, we go back and we start at the beginning. So you, Councillor Craig Cromelin, your family, I usually ask people, who's your mob?
On my mum's side, her maiden name, she was Bridget Johnson, born to parents John and Bessie Johnson. And then she met a chap that came out to Murrin Bridge when she was fairly young, old enough to get married anyway. He was originally from around the Coffs Harbour, Grafton area, a fellow by the name of Harry Cromelin. There'd be many mob that are from up that way, so and I know some of them, not all of them. I haven't met many of them. And they started a family out at Murrin Bridge, and that's where I live to this very day. Got three siblings. One of them I've passed, but eldest brother Rod, Greg, who's the next oldest, who's passed. Then there was me and my sister Rosalind. They've spread at different parts of the countryside, but that's our mob. And then, so on my grandmother's side, she's a king from the Nyampa tribe, and then on my grandfather's side, he's a Johnson, obviously, and he's Wiradjuri. And I identify with both of them. I can't not do that, although, in fairness, I've learnt more about my Nyampa side because of my nan's siblings, their sisters and our brothers that were speaking the language in Murrin Bridge. Unfortunately, my old grandfather passed away when I was 14, and I didn't get a chance to learn much about his culture. But he used to tell us little bit of stories, and that was good. Gave us a bit of a insight to the world that he grew up, which was very different to the world that I grew up in.
So the world you grew up in was at Murrin Bridge, but Murrin Bridge even these days, it's a pretty small place, isn't it?
Very small place. First set up around 1947. My mum was actually born on the banks of the Darling River at Menindee Mission. Her grandparents, which is my great-grandparents, moved from a little Aboriginal settlement or reserve or tank, as they were back in those days, called Carrara Tank, moved to Menindee Mission. That's where she was born. And then at the age of 8 years of age, Murrin Bridge was built. She moved to Murrin Bridge with her mum and dad and started a new life. And so that's been home. But my dad was killed when I was 2 years old, so I don't remember much about him. And my mum raised me and my siblings, my brothers and two brothers and sister, pretty much on our own. She's our biggest influence, our rock that we look to, and our inspiration, all of those words. took us to West Wyalong for a couple of years between 72 and 73. And as kids, we just missed everything about Lake or Murrin Bridge. So we sort of bossed Mum to take us back home. And we moved back home in 74. I started school there. She bought a house in Lake Jellicoe. It's where we grew up. She sold it many years after. But when I left school, moved out to Murrin Bridge and started my adult life out there. Got exposed to a lot of things, including governance, where I am today.
So in terms of Murrin Bridge, as a place, as a community, and I've heard, you talk about Lake Jellicoe quite a bit, just in conversation, but it does crop up a lot, and that's something I've noticed in the time that I've known you. Can you give us a bit of an idea of what it was like being a kid there at the time, at the lake in Murrin Bridge, a small, newish community?
I guess my earliest years at Murrin Bridge was, we used to have a mission manager there, and so I sort of grew up at the back end of it, from my recollection. And I think he finished around 73, 74, 75, something like that. He left Murrin Bridge and we were then left to our own devices as a community, and that gave way to a new future, I guess, and the community started to deciding on which way they would like to go. I grew up in Lake Jellicoe, which was I guess at times it felt like a bit of a world away. When you're on the Murrin Bridge, it seems like that's your world, and then when you're in Lake Jellicoe, you see things very different because you got, the broader community, you got Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, and so you had to deal with some things that were right in your face, which was racism, and it confronted you, but then you also got to learn some things that we wouldn't ever have had the opportunity if we were on Murrin Bridge, and some of those things were good and bad. It helps to shape you as an individual going forward.
In terms of growing up, so you're the third of 4 children, and the third boy and 1 girl, right?
Yep.
Any, sort of childhood memories with your brothers or your sister that sort of stands out?
Oh, yeah.
A few, huh?
I guess me and Grego, we seemed to out that way. We had all of our nicknames were ended with an O. So my brother, eldest fellow, he's Rod, so he became Roddo. Greg, he became Grego, and
you were Craigo?
Me Craigo, so I'm Craigo, and I respond to.
What about
that most of the Rosalind, she was just Rosalind.
Okay, they were too scared to call her Rosso.
Me and Greg, we got up to all sorts of mischief as young fellas, but we also experienced life. We used to go rabbit hunting. We used to go hunting for a lot of things, actually. We knew we dig our own bundis. We go out and hunt our own rabbits with a bundi. We were really good at hunting. We had good hunting dogs, so we used to go out. I was in third and second class. I used to go out with boys. I used to drag my feet along, and they'd always clip me on the ear. I'll make sure I kept up with them. But you had wonderful memories of doing stuff, and I used to take my grandkids out and show them how we used to go hunting rabbits, and how we dig our own bundis, and look for quandongs and stuff, and showing some of the kids about that sort of stuff today. Even when we used to go fishing as kids with the old people, they'd take us and sit us on the riverbank, and that was a wonderful experience. But we got up to a lot of mischief, me and my brother. The older fellow, he's 5 years older than me, so he started reaching that teenager years, and he distanced himself and sort of went with the bigger one, but always very protective of his younger siblings. And the sister, well, what we used to do was we used to be a bit of a terror, and with the sister, as you can imagine, do a lot of play acting, and I've become a bit of a drummer in my time, and that sort of started when I was in 5th class. And so I used to play the chairs, and they can always remember me playing the chairs, or ripping the chairs, because I used to play the chairs as a drum with Mum's knives. And she'd always get upset, say, "Craig, you ripped my chairs again." But I'm playing drums today on real drums, and I love it. And that started from that. But yeah, wonderful memories of growing up. But what I got to say is, my mum, she was pretty strict with us. Give us a bit of a
Clip under the ear.
clip under the ear all if we needed it, but she taught us respect, and something that has never left us. We've always been very mindful and respectful of whomever and wherever.
I guess though, with your father not being there, you got to be strong. She had to be strong.
Oh, she was as strong as anyone that you'd ever know, and there are a lot of things that we didn't know about where she would defend our honour, and we didn't know if we mucked up, and if we did muck up, we get clipped under the ear roll, and she told us right from wrong, but she would also defend our very honour. We had uncles that would always check in on us. There was a guy that used to play music with my old man, and I'm actually playing music with him. He's been playing for going on 60 years, and it's a wonderful thing that I thought I was going to be a guitar player until I discovered, if you remember the band Sweet, they sang
I do.
Fox on the Run and Peppermint Sweets, well, Ballroom Blitz, and the beat that the drummer played. From that day on, I wanted to be a drummer. And so I get to play with Lindsay, who's also happened to be my stepfather-in-law, so it's wonderful, and he's a lovely man.
You're listening to A Cuppa and A Yarn. I'm Michelle Aleksandrovics-Lovegrove, and I'm speaking here with Craig Cromelin, Councillor Craig Cromelin for the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, who is retiring, I guess, aren't you?
I've learnt in my time of 30-odd years of being involved with governance that leadership is, for me, this is my personal view and not necessarily what I force upon others. I've learnt with leadership, you've got to know when to step forward, but just as importantly, you've got to know when to step back. And the choice to step back is mine, and I've based it purely on the fact that I want the network to remain vibrant. I want it to remain moving forward and new and fresh ideas coming on board. I'll be forever a supporter of land rights at the highest level, very much supportive of whomever wins the election in our region, and supportive of whomever are our councillors that will take us forward, certainly of our local land council. So I've been afforded a wonderful opportunity by the region, which is the Wiradjuri region, and certainly by my people back home in my local Aboriginal Land Council. And it's great to be able to step back and allow someone else to come forward and take it to the next level, because it never was mine. It wasn't mine to hold. It was someone else's before me, someone else's before them. And like that situation, after this next person is elected, either they will be re-elected or someone else will take it up. And I've just learnt that you know when time's right to back away. I know.
Absolutely. On A Cuppa and A Yarn, we'll be back after the break.
Make your mark on November 30. That's election day for the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Rights Network. Members, just go to our website at www.alc.org.au to find out how to lodge a postal vote and how to vote on the day.
This is A Cuppa and A Yarn from the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. I'm Michelle Aleksandrovics-Lovegrove, and I'm talking today with Craig Cromelin, Councillor Craig Cromelin, about life memories and your work certainly in governance and land rights and what the future holds for you. I was doing a little bit of research on you, as you do. I saw here cotton picker, carpenter, welder, and certainly work that you did in establishing Australia's first and only Aboriginal winery. But let's talk about being a carpenter, etc. Was that, you were basing that sort of business in Murrin Bridge, is that right?
Back then they were doing a number of pre-apprentice courses around the countryside, and they were fantastic courses, and I can absolutely vouch for that. And what it meant that you'd leave home and you would be placed in a hostel for a period of probably about 11 months of the year, and you would apply your apprenticeship back then. In 82, I was successful in, to be accepted into a course. Originally, it was going to be down in Granville, TAFE. That's where I got accepted into there. I said, I didn't want to be in Sydney. Is there another place that I can go to? And there just happened to be someone who was out in Dubbo who didn't want to be out in Dubbo. They wanted to be in Sydney. So it was a perfect swap, and I went to Dubbo. Me and a mate, very good mate from home, we went there fortnight or so. Pretty tough. First time I'd ever been away from home. First time I'd done a lot of things on my own. Up until then, it was everything I did was with my mates, with my family, and certainly Mum did everything for me. I was, although I could cook toast and cook a few other things, and learned to iron my clothes because Mum taught me how to do those things. And this was more than just about learning a skill around carpentry. It was giving me life skills, and I kept ringing up Mum. I said, "Can you come and pick me up? I want to go home." And thankfully, the car wasn't good enough. She had an old white Holden, that wasn't in the best of shape, and she couldn't come and pick me up. But she kept saying to me, "No, son, you got to stay there. Stick it out." And I used to ring her up, and then all of a sudden, I started making mates, and I started getting used to. And that was something that I'd never done before. I never had to make mates because I grew up around them. And so Mum rang me up. It was a bit of a turnaround. She said, "Son, what's wrong?" I said, what do you mean?" She said, "You're not ringing me up?" I said, "Oh, Mum, I'm loving it." She said, "Oh, you must be because you're not ringing me." So, and so
ringing
I got
too
into
much,
it.
not ringing enough.
Yeah, and so the course was really good. We built 2 houses in Dubbo while we were there, but we did everything from building our own prefabs. They weren't built off-site. We had to put them all together. We had to learn to dig the trenches at first, but most of the things we did by hand. There was no electric tools on site. We had to cut everything by hand. And I left home as a 17-year-old. I turned 18 up there, and I always say that I left home as a boy and I came away a man. But not just any old man. I became an independent person, someone who didn't require to be one of the mob when I got back home. I wanted to do my own thing. I became my own man, or my own person out of that. So carpentry was always a passion, and still is a passion that I like today.
How did that go with your mum? Because as you were saying, you're coming back in, as a man, and certainly moving into the man that you would become further as you grew. Did you start looking after her maybe a bit more?
I think I did. I know I lived with her for a little while before I got with my partner, and we then started our own life together. And I still go and check on her now and then. She's now 80 years of age, lives on her own, but just a couple of houses over from me. And being a councillor means you're away from home a fair bit, so I do call in there and have a yarn with her. I'll cook her a meal and I'll take some stuff over there, but I've learned to take care of her whenever I'm home.
This is A Cuppa and A Yarn. I'm Michelle Aleksandrovics-Lovegrove. I'm speaking with Councillor Craig Cromelin.
Make your mark on November the 30th, the election day for the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Rights Network. Members, go to our website at www.alc.org.au to find out more information.
So, Councillor, I only recently found out about this, and I'm sort of tickled pink, is about Murrin Bridge Wines, the winery. How did that start?
Well, CDP for us started in 1987. It was a wonderful program that actually it was the only thing that we had up until that time. We had nothing. The community was almost at rock bottom, and the people that were at DAA at the time came over and had numerous amounts of cups of teas and community barbecues, and they said, "We need you to set up a committee to take on this new program." And it was a godsend for us. It saved our community. It gave us the opportunity to design our own future. It gave us security. It gave people in the community power, and I'm not talking about power where you're excluding people. It gave us. You got to remember back in them days when we were doing business, we had no power. We walked into shops and they could dismiss us just like that at the drop of a hat because we were Aboriginal. We had the power of money. CDP gave us the power of money. And we walked into shops and said, well, either you want to do business with us or you don't. If you don't, we'll take our business elsewhere. And for us, that was one of the best things that ever came out of it. It taught us a lot of lessons along the way. CDP was basically whatever the community wanted to do. So Murrin Bridge wine started from a market gardening course. We'd done that for about 8 years. We chopped and changed and had modules taken from different various courses to suit our needs. It was one of the first occasions where TAFE actually changed their training and teaching methods to bring the programs out to the community, sit down and work out and achieve the same objectives. And Murrin Bridge Wines is proof we made that work from practical work. We did have to learn, do some theory around the chemical usage, which was necessary, but everything else was pretty much practical, hands-on approach, and the results meant that we still got the same objective or outcome.
Just out of curiosity, did you keep any bottles of wine? Have you got any hanging about?
Unfortunately, we don't have any, and I do know that some of those people that got in early still have some of the wine available, which I've been reliably informed that they're not opening at all. And it's a keepsake for them. And people might look at it and say, well, it's not running now, so therefore it's not a success. But see, I regard success in different manners. I think to take a group of 16 guys, and there were 16 guys involved, and I was only but one of them. I'm not the catalyst. I'm one of 16 guys that were involved. And we took an idea from the Italian TAFE teacher that is a fourth generation grape grower himself, who suggested the initial idea. I mean, initially we said, get out of here, you don't want blackfellas making wine, growing grapes, that sort of stuff. He said, yeah, it's unheard of, it's never been done before. But we took that idea and made it work. Incidentally, out of the 20 acres that we had put aside, there were over 10,000 grapevines that went into that vineyard. We grew every single one of those grapevines ourselves, grew them from scratch. None of us had set foot in a vineyard before, let alone grown our own grapes. We put all the posts in, we trellised everything. Trellis means that you get the young vine to grow up, a string, and onto the wire, and then you trellis them out. We grew every single one of them ourselves. The fact that it fell over wasn't because of their lack of efforts and their commitment to it. It was other outside influences that had a detrimental effect on it.
Oh, what a wonderful story, though. Hey, what a wonderful thing, an Aboriginal vineyard. And, who knows, given weather, conditions, ever thought about reviving it?
What it taught me was that anything is possible.
Yes.
That if you believe in it and you're willing to work at it, that you could make anything happen. I used to say to myself, well, that's not an Aboriginal business. And I thought, whoa, stop there. An Aboriginal business is whatever an Aboriginal person wants to do. So we started pigeonholing ourselves, so it should be, to do with art and it should be to do with culture, but it doesn't have to. You can incorporate those things into your business, but it doesn't have to be necessarily around it. And whenever our slogan, of which I used to be the promoter and salesman type person within the operation.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah. We came up with a catch cry, and I had a bit of outside help with this. Was our little catch cry was, if you like red wine or white wine, try black wine, Australia's first and only Aboriginal wine, which was Murrin Bridge wines. And to this day, it's still on the lips of other people. They ask about it quite regular, and it did fantastically well considering that we had no experience prior to it. We had a production company come from Canada. They were called the Thirsty Traveller, travelled all the way to Australia to do a story on 3 wineries, one from the Clare Valley, one from the, there were 4, one from the Hunter Valley, one from Griffith, which is Yellowtail, which is a hugely successful vineyard, and we were the 4th one. And in every one of those other 3, every time they told a story, they each said, our family's been involved in this for decades. And they come to Murrin Bridge, he says, how long have you been in this? I said, we've only been involved for 4 years or 5 years. He said, so we can't claim to be involved, have decades of wine experience behind us, but we're not selling you wine. That's not what we're about. You want to come here, you've got to learn about our community, you've got to learn about our culture, our people. The story just happens to be that we've got wine. We cooked him Johnny cakes. He went and swam with the kids in the river. We cooked him a kangaroo tail. He says out of all of the experiences that he went to, the Clare Valley, Hunter Valley and over at Griffith, he reckoned ours was by far the most pleasurable and interesting place that he'd ever been to. And I thought, wow, that's great. Great endorsement. So again, I'm still of the belief to this day that anything is possible. I've never shifted from that belief that we can be whatever we want to be if we're prepared to work at it.
You're listening to A Cuppa and A Yarn. I'm speaking with Councillor Craig Cromelin, and after the break, we're going to be talking about land rights.
From the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, this is A Cuppa and A Yarn.
This is A Cuppa and A Yarn from the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. I'm Michelle Aleksandrovics-Lovegrove. I'm speaking with Councillor Craig Cromelin about life, family, inspirations, and now, of course, land rights, because that's certainly how I know you, Councillor. We were discussing some of your career ventures in Murrin Bridge wines, etc. But you were already a member of your local Aboriginal Land Council, which was Murrin Bridge. That's right, isn't it? You joined at quite a young age.
I was around 21 years old when I first became elected. I was a chairperson at around about 21 or 22 years old.
Of the LAUC,
Of the local Aboriginal Land Council. So my involvement, goes back a fair bit. I must say, back then it was very different because I had hair. My clothes size was a hell of a lot thinner back then.
How did you sort of move from that? You're doing all this other stuff on the side. Life is happening, right? But land rights is happening too. How important for you in Murrin Bridge was it that you stepped up into those leadership roles in that movement?
You got to remember in these little communities, remote communities, and Murrin Bridge is certainly one of those. It's nearest community to us is 15 kilometres away, so we're right on the banks of the Lachlan River, 1,000 acres all to ourselves, but not a lot of opportunity. And if we didn't seize the opportunities of being a part of a committee and being a part of an organisation, I guess if I use an analogy, I've learnt over a period of time that an organisation or an entity is only a vehicle, and what it needs is people to drive it, and they're the people that sit on the boards, whether they're chairperson. Back in them days it was chair, secretary or treasurer on the land councils, but whether it was in an organisation, they may have been similar. You had a chair or deputy chair or vice chair. Again, they require people to drive them. And we had a guy come to Murrin Bridge in 87 it was. He was an advisor, community advisor, and he spoke to me. At the time I was a chair of an organisation. I was reluctant. I could see him walking down the lane. I was shaking my head thinking, I don't want to have this conversation, not now, not at this point in time. He came up, he introduced himself, and I didn't shake his hand initially. I said, look, brother, I know who you are. I know why you're here. He was a non-Aboriginal person too, by the way. I said, if you don't mind, I'm having a drink with my family and friends. Can you come back on Monday? And he said to me, Craig, do you have a family? And that's what I knew he was going to ask that. And I said, I knew you were going to ask that. He said, well, do you? I said, yes, I do. And I thought, my God, I know what he's going to say next. And then he said, do you want to give him a good future? And I said, I knew you was going to say that. With that, he just shook my hand and he said, I'll see you on Monday. Have a good weekend, enjoy your drink. And I thought,
That was
wow.
clever.
And so when Monday came along, I was chomping at the bit waiting to see him. He said, how you going? I said, I'm good, ready to do this. And then he didn't do anything fantastic. He didn't give us anything. He just sat us down, told us how to run our meetings, how to control community meetings, board meetings, interact with the agencies when they used to come along. Because here I was as a young fellow, raw, didn't know how to do any of that. But he taught us. He never did it for us. He sat us down and he said, this is how you go about do it. He left us in three months, and it was the best 3 months that we've ever had. We decided we'd take on the community and run it ourselves, and we never looked back. From that day, we never looked back. Everyone has got family. If it's not your own, it's then your siblings or your friends or whatever. So there's your inspiration. And if you want to give them a future, well, again, there's your inspiration. That was my inspiration. It's always been my inspiration about doing those things. And governance gives you the opportunity, a wonderful opportunity, to be able to do it, whether it's in your land council, local Aboriginal Land Council, and now I've had the opportunity at the highest level, which is as a Councillor of New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, to do exactly that same thing, but not just from a local perspective or a regional, but from a state perspective.
When was it that you said, okay, I'm going to step up to that state level and I'm going to run in the elections?
In around 2005, I think it was, I was elected delegate from my local Aboriginal Land Councils. We still had the regions that were operating. I was elected one of the 2 delegates from my region to attend the region. And I went over and I started getting involved, and you can go over there and you could, just twiddle your thumbs and be there. But I wanted to ask questions, and I guess CDP and the wines thing taught me about, well, we can take this wherever we want. There was wind at that time that the regions were going to be shut down and people were just going through the motion. I didn't particularly want to do that. I wanted to go over and say, well, what can we do in the time that we have available to make it productive? So I've always been someone who takes a positive from a negative, whatever the situation. The chair that was currently there at the time had to resign because of a new employment opportunity came up for him, and then we had to go to elections. So little did I know that when we have an election, I turned up because I was tormenting the other delegate that went with me. I said, I'm going to nominate you to be the chair. Little did I know when I turned up that all the other delegates had already met and they'd had a conversation, and they said, we're going to elect Craig and there'll be no one else. So I was elected unopposed. So
okay. So this was the regional Aboriginal Land Council.
Regional Aboriginal Land Council.
Okay.
That was my first step into regional. I was being involved at that level within the local, the land council system. And I had probably about 4 or 5 months involved in that before we went to elections. I didn't get re-elected as a delegate from my local land council, so I couldn't be re-elected as the chair of the Wiradjuri region. But I enjoyed it. It gave me so much insight and I learned a lot from it. And it gave me the confidence to say that I'm ready for running for a councillor post administration in 2007. So, and Michelle, I could not stand here today if I didn't become involved in my local community as a board of director or a chairperson. Most of my life I've been a chairperson, and I've always conducted myself as if I was a chairperson, act like a chairperson would act, do the things that a chairperson would do without having that title alongside you. And so you carry yourself with that sort of level of distinction and required as a board member anyway. So it gave me the confidence. All of those things kept laying a platform, and in 2006 I decided this is what I want to do. I'm ready. I knew I was ready, and when I put my hand up in 2007 to run for the election, I think I was 44 years old, so I wasn't a young man, I wasn't an old man, but I just knew I was ready. And we each know that. And sometimes you can be forced into it when you're not quite ready, but everything worked in sequence. And so I say to people that if you're involved in your local Aboriginal Land Council, or any board member for that matter, but if you're at your local land council and you're a board member, don't think of it as a dead-end path. It's actually a stepping stone that can take you well beyond there. It can actually take you to many places, at least not of all a Council of New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, because it gives you that solid grounding that you need when you're making decisions. And you know, whenever I make decisions, the first thing I always draw on, what did I do when I was back in my community? That's how I always operate.
You have been a deputy chair. You've been the chair of New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council as well. In that time, I know there have been a lot of standouts. Anything, decisions that have been made by council, etc., for communities that you are very proud to discuss?
There's been many achievements, I think, of the Land Rights Network, certainly at NSWALC level, but there's also been many achievements at the local land council level. So I've often been asked by previous councillors, been fortunate enough to be a councillor alongside, they would always ask what was, the most memorable thing. Coming out of administration, I know this as a former regional representative, that a lot of people in my region didn't particularly like NSWALC. And so there was very much an us and them attitude. And when I first came on board and they said, what would you like to see happen? I said, we've got to change this us and them attitude. And they said, oh, well, it doesn't exist. So I said, well, I'm afraid to tell you that it does, because I came from that regional perspective. A lot of people out there are resentful and hurtful about how the amendments that took place in 2005-06, which then came into effect in 2007. So our greatest achievement post-administration was getting the respect of the network back, and we did that with a great deal of care and respectfulness back to the network. We didn't went out there pleading for them to come out. We actually went out there and engaged with them and listened to them and brought them back in. But not only just the respect of our network, which is absolutely critical and vital, but then we had to get the respect back of government. We had to get respect of business that wanted to come back and deal with NSWALC. And I, to this day, where we are now in the land rights system could not have been achieved. Everything is like a stepping stone. And for us post-administration, that was the thing that laid the very foundation for us to be in the position we are today, which is very encouraging and very bright future moving forward. For me, I put that down as being one of the greatest achievements. Others may look at it very differently, but I look at the small things, not necessarily the big standout features or achievements that others may look at.
This is A Cuppa and A Yarn from the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. I'm speaking with Councillor Craig Cromelin. To be a chair of an organisation, or councillor at least, making decisions on a statewide level, how do you balance that with your community groundedness?
The benefit that I've had is, 30 years or 20 years of being a councillor or chairperson in my own community, so I knew what to expect there, and that's where really the lessons were learnt. These were lessons by people that didn't even go to school or never even finished school, but some of the smartest people, our elders and that were wise people that took the time to say, "Come here, boy, I got to tell you this," or "Come here, boy, I got to, show you that," and it was those little small lessons along the way, and I'm grateful and fortunate that I've had that solid grounding, coming from community first and then slowly working my way up. I don't have a degree in anything, but the education that I've learned and the skills that I've gained are from some of the smartest people. So I just draw on those things that I have from my background. That's about it, Michelle.
You're stepping into a new phase of your life. It's the same life, but certainly it's going to be somewhat different. You're still a member of Murrin Bridge Local Aboriginal Land Council, aren't you? So you were mentioning earlier that your interest in and your involvement in land rights is going to continue.
It took me a long, long time for me to accept governance. I didn't look for it, it found me. I remember a couple of aunties when I was 25 pulled me aside. Both of them were ill, both of them were struck down with cancer, and they were having a beer of an afternoon. I was going up to play touch football on a bare football oval that we had. We used to play barefooted too, by the way. No grass was on it, it was just bare paddock. And they sang out, "Come here, boy." And I went over there and I was trying to hurry him along, make it look like I was checking my watch and that. They said, "No, we need to ask you something." I said, "What's that, Auntie?" They said, "Righto." I said, "We're sick and we're dying." I said, it sort of changed my attitude. I said, "Yeah, I do know that." They said, "Well, righto. This is our home. When we came here, we looked after it. When we die, we want you to promise that you'll keep looking after this community." It felt all of a sudden like this huge weight was about to be dropped onto my shoulder. And I said, "Auntie, I'm only young." I said, "Look, what if I want to go?" And I said, No. We want you to promise us that you look after this place. I said, "Well, what if there's older people there that can do this? I'm only a young fella." They said, "No, we want you." So I had to think about all of these, my life in front of me, my young family, that I might have wanted to go somewhere and learn some of the skills, to go to university, to do something. I said, okay, I'll do it. And they said, "Good, now go and play touch football." And they were sitting there having a drink. And these old girls used to speak in their lingo, speak it fluently. And I never told anyone. Never told my mum, never told my partner, none of my brothers or sisters, aunties, uncle. Never told anyone. It was a promise I made to two old ladies. And I'm glad I did. I pulled out a photo of myself when I was 21. And, it was tough back then because all of a sudden I was doing things that my mates were walking around and enjoying their life, free, no commitments, no nothing. I couldn't follow them because I had a meeting to go to. I had someone come into the community to talk to us, and when I pulled out that photo of that 21-year-old fella, and I actually said thank you to him. Seems a little bit weird, but I did. I said thank you. I said, because if it wasn't for you having the commitment and the courage to do those things, and your heart in the right place, I would never have had the opportunity, the wonderful opportunities, to do the things that I have done, fortunate enough to do. Go to the United Nations, whether it's Geneva or New York, or visit the many wonderful communities that I have through the land rights system, and meet so many fantastic and inspiring people in my journey. And it's all thanks to that young guy having, and that's, you know, someone said to me, what's the best quality you should have as a board member? And I just say courage. Courage to do it in the first place, the courage to make tough decisions when others won't do it, the courage to do the right thing where it's easy to just go along with the normal flow. And I'm very fortunate, but I was guided by some inspiring elders back in them days, and I'm very fortunate to have listened to them.
You're listening to A Cuppa and A Yarn. Don't forget, November 30 is election day for the New South Wales Land Rights Network. You can lodge your postal vote or go to a polling booth on the day. Head over to the website at alc.org.au for more details.
This is A Cuppa and A Yarn from the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council. I'm Michelle Aleksandrovics-Lovegrove. I'm speaking with Craig Cromelin, councillor, former chair, deputy chair, and a man who's been inspired and acted on the advice of his elders over many years, and very, very humble and grateful from what I'm gathering from our conversation to be able to have worked in governance for such a long period of time. I think when those aunties spoke with you, you were already actually on the way there. You just didn't have a title.
And that's why I always say to people, you know, sometimes we're made as leaders, sometimes we're born. And this thing followed me. I just had to accept it, and I've accepted it now for the last 20 years. It's what I do and what I do well, but it doesn't mean I get too big-headed about it. I've remained humble, and they're all the lessons that I've learnt from those people that I've come in touch with over the years.
For people who don't know Craig Cromelin, may not know this. For people who know him, you definitely will. You take photos of animals, of birds you love, a lot of macro work, you know, close-ups on flowers and all sorts of interesting patterns. And can you talk to us a little bit about your photography? Because if you haven't seen his work, anybody, go to Instagram. You're on Instagram, aren't you? Yeah.
Well, photography is something that I've began to enjoy more and more. It's like anything. You get into it, you fall into it, you do it for the right reasons, and once you discover how to bring the best out of anything, out of yourself, you then want to learn more about it. And initially I got into it because I used to like sending good morning messages to people, and I used to actually download good morning messages from the internet. And someone said, why are you doing that? And I said, I want to just send good morning messages to people.
And he still does that, by the way.
Why don't you take your own photos? And I said, can I do that? I said, but how do I write on it? So they were teaching me things about downloading apps and then putting my own messages onto the phone. And so that became something that I thoroughly enjoyed. But then a situation happened where my second brother was faced with that mongrel of a thing, cancer. And there were two things that happened during his last month alive, and one of them was we weren't allowed to allow him to get sick or anything. We had to protect him, keep him. Anyone that was sick, we had to stay away from him and that sort of stuff. And he wanted to go outside. It was winter time, and he bossed his missus, said, take me outside, I want to go outside. He was in a wheelchair, so he couldn't walk at this time. So we pushed him out the back. And there was a sunset, and I didn't really take much notice to it. It's a sunset. And then, so we stayed out there for about 3 or 4 minutes, back inside. And the other time was he did the same thing, take me outside, I want to go outside. So we took him outside after, despite our protests. He went out there and he just closed his eyes because there was a nice cool breeze blowing. And I thought nothing of it. And then I asked myself the question, why would he want to go outside and look at a sunset? Why would he want to feel the breeze? Why would it dying? And then it wasn't till I sort of came to that conclusion that he wanted to take something with him to the other side of the world. And what perfect thing to take with you than a sunset. And the wind, who would have thought that that's something that you would want to take, just remember that and take with you the other side. And so my message from him, I guess, without him telling me, was that enjoy the simple things in life while you can before your time is up. And so I've been taking pictures of the most mundane things in our life: flowers, butterflies, ants, dragonflies, snakes. I'll get down in front of a snake. I was 7 metres from a king brown the other day, or they call it a mulga snake. I've learnt. I used to be absolutely fearful of them, but now I don't, because a friend told me once that photography captures what the eye misses, and there's a beauty in everything that we have out there. We just have to stop. And photography, you just can't rush these things. You know that yourself, Michelle. You have to have time, and sometimes I'll sit for hours or 2 hours to capture an image, one image. You know, it might be a bird, it might be a goanna, or a gookar, as we call it, or a snake. And it doesn't matter whether it's a deadly one. I won't ever put myself at risk, but they're there. There's beauty in everything, and I've only just now starting to learn how to capture people. I guess I'm comfortable with birds and animals and sceneries. I'm now getting comfortable with capturing people in the right light. But everything is about having the time. You need time to do it, and you might learn something new that you didn't know about them the day before. And I've been learning heaps of things.
So you now are moving into a different time for yourself. So looking back, your work in land rights, which doesn't necessarily, is not going to stop, it's just going to change. Any sort of pearls of wisdom or thoughts for upcoming leaders, for how the network's going to go, for the good qualities of a leader that you might care to share?
I guess just, and people always told me when I was at the region, they said to me, make sure you don't forget where you come from. And I said, well, I never do that. Look, when I first became a councillor, I thought what I knew prior to that was sufficient. I had to absolutely readjust, because I thought to myself, holy, what have I got myself into here? This is significant at the highest. It is. I mean, whatever you do at your local level, times it by probably 1,000 or 10,000. That's how serious it is. That's how significant this job is. It's not a backyard operation. It's a pretty high-level organisation that operates at the highest level, and it will not lower its standards. You have to rise to the level. Thank goodness for my grounding at the local level, and many people will come into the elections with having that level of sure footing from the local level. So a lot of other things that I'll probably keep to myself and help to use to guide myself in my next stage of life, and I'm looking forward to it, Michelle. I'm really looking forward to it, because I am the master of my own destiny, and that's something that I'll never change, and I'll always be that. But I'm forever grateful. Can I say thank you to everyone that's been in the land rights network that I've come across. Thank you for making me welcome. If I get to catch up with you at some time, I'd love to have a cuppa or
a yarn
and a yarn, like I am now. I've always been a rather humble person. I'll never change that. And so thank you to everyone out there for the opportunity I've had to be a councillor of the most significant Aboriginal organisation in this country, New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council.
You can do Nayania Baraya, Nayania Manania, Manania, Manania.